You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Thanks for joining us this week's episode. As always, I'll remind you at the top of the show, because typically it's at the end, but shoeinshow.com, we are starting to enter 8 years of podcasting. Now, if you had told me that we'd be doing 8 years of podcasting 8 years ago, I'd say, first of all, what's a podcast? And then I would say there's no way that people are still going to be listening to me and Matt banter about footwear on a podcast for 8 years. But here we are, and there you are, and thank you for listening. So I think what makes this podcast so special and great is the ability to bring on folks across our dynamic industry to talk about their brands, their stories, how they do their business, right? We have such a great entrepreneurial system in the U.S. that everybody does their footwear business operations a little bit different. And what we do on the show is talk about those, and hopefully people can pick up a few tips and improve their business along the way. So with that, Matt, who do we have on this week to share the joy of this podcast?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I'm really excited about the episode this week because we talk often about how brands in the modern era need a story. They need something that draws in their buyers and their customers so that they can go along for the ride, right? And to gravitate towards a story, a purpose, a value. And I can't think of a company within our membership ranks and within the broader industry that has the story than BILLY Footwear and Billy Price, who's one of the co-founders of BILLY Footwear. Billy, welcome to Shoe In Show. We're so excited to have you join us. We know you have a special story as to how you got into the industry. And as is tradition, we have a new participant on Shoe In Show who we haven't talked to before. We asked them, what is their shoe story? So what's your shoe story? How on earth did you get into the footwear business, my friend?
Well, first off, guys, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited to be here with you. So I am a wheelchair user. That wasn't always the case. I broke my neck when I was a teenager. I fell out of a 3-story window, and really my life changed forever. My fellow co-founder, Mr. Darren Donaldson, he was inspired to go out and try to learn how to make shoes. And I was catching up with him at a Christmas party years ago, and he was telling me about what he was working on, and I was just so excited about hearing what he was doing, and I threw an idea at him, and it was simply to put a zipper in a shoe that wrapped around the toe, which would be something that I could put on independently. And that was the birth, which later turned into BILLY Footwear.
Wow, that's unbelievable. It's things you don't think about, but obviously with the tragedy of your accident as a teenager, you have set out on a path driving change and engaging with retailers who want to drive similar change. And there are these small things that I don't think about that are really important to those who need the extra help to put on a pair of shoes. And so how was that process? We know that designing a normal pair of shoes is difficult. It's time consuming. You got Asia, you got to ship things back and forth, you got prototypes. Talk to us about the process of developing your prototype.
Well, it took first. It took. Let me pause there. It took an effort to just commit to the project, and the question really was, where do you start? So Darren was already working on a shoe project of his own. He already had some established, a factory over in China. So we were kind of able to leverage the relationships that he'd already built. But it all started with a drawing. It was me just saying hey, Darren, this is the idea that I have. And then he made a rendering drawing, which was just very rudimentary, but it was enough to communicate what the idea was. And then we referenced other shoes out there that we'd like to kind of, duplicate in terms of where we found inspiration in our design. We reached out to his agent. They made our prototype. The prototype came back to us, and it absolutely worked perfectly. It looked exactly like our drawing. And when I put it on, that was the first time I was able to put my shoes on independently in 18 years. I broke my neck at 18. I put my shoes on again at 36. And that was really the moment that pushed us to move forward. And then the big question is, well, how do you do that? And that's a much bigger conversation.
Well, that's what we're here for, Billy. I would, so it's very interesting because there's so much functionality in shoes that people need but don't think about. And here you're talking about the functionality of having accessibility to put on a pair of shoes. Everything is so focused on lace and things like that just a simple thing, a simple zipper and a simple idea to do that can open up so many doors for other people who are struggling with just putting on a pair of shoes. So take us through. So you had the prototype, you had the vision. What, over the last several years, how have you expanded? I mean, I look at your website and see these great products and see these retailers that you are working with. How has that story and that product been received? Because obviously your story's amazing, but you got to have an amazing product too, right? It's got to be backed up when you walk into that retailer to get them to put it on their shelf.
You're absolutely right. And our approach to the market was really focused on universal design, meaning that we came to the market with a functional need, which was my own personal need to overcome the barriers that I was facing by trying to put on my own shoes. But for us to be successful as a business, we knew we had to have a much bigger audience. And that's where the universal design came into fact. Having an easy on, easy off shoe for anybody, that was really the target audience we were going after. But at the same time, in that same breath, we wanted to make sure that someone like myself would also be successful at going into major retailers to buy their shoes too. So it's basically a blend between fashion and function, smashing that together, going after the masses, but also being a very inclusive brand for someone with a disability, and they would also be successful.
Yeah, and I'm looking too. I mean, it was really hard to find the name for this footwear company, Billy, but I'm glad you searched far and wide and found it. But just a little joke. So what in the environment you're faced with today, like the economic environment, right? Like we've got tight margins, we have inventory issues. Since launching and since going in there, what do your teams look like? How does your company function and work? And what are you guys looking for the next several years? Like what's the next iteration or what's the growth trajectory that you guys have?
Well, we really launched in 2016. So that's when we became BILLY Footwear. As we continued to grow, we moved out of my parents' basement into Darren's kitchen and then into our first warehouse. But as we continue to
Matt's
grow,
in his basement right now, just FYI. We're podcasting.
I am. I'm aspiring to move out of my basement to a friend's kitchen into the warehouse too, Billy. So you've inspired me, my friend.
Well, that's awesome. And then, what I'm getting at here is we grew through this pandemic. I mean, we were a lot of brands that were very established, and then all of a sudden got hit by the pandemic. They had to kind of change their game real time. Whereas for us, we were just an emerging brand, just enduring through the pandemic, just like everybody else. But we didn't really, the brand was still establishing itself. So we hit all those pitfalls when it came to supply chain, difficulty traveling, retail partners, like all of a sudden kind of closing up their doors. So it was tough, but because we were a new brand entering into the market, we really didn't know what we didn't know. So we continue to have continued growth through all those difficult times. So when I get the question like, what's next? It's a matter of keep doing what we're doing, but at the same time, understanding that there's so many markets out there that we haven't been able to penetrate yet. So much of our success has been hinged on building relationships and word of mouth. And that's a tried and true method since the beginning of time. So we really double down on those efforts and trying to tell the story of the brand, tell the story of our customers. So many customers have had success with their shoes, and empowering them to share information about the brand within their networks. And it's worked really, really well.
So it's interesting. You guys show in our pop-up in New York during Fanny Market Weeks, and I was with Patrick Foster in your space just last month, and we were looking at some of the new product coming out, the fresh new logo on the sidewall, the shoes, even backpacks, things I don't even think about how you're coming out with backpacks that are functional or accessible for those with disabilities. So it seems that there is a frontier that you're starting to chart a course across. So walk me through some of those cool new products. And then who are some of your big retailers? Who are you working with and really enjoy strong relationships with right now?
Well, when we first started, we launched with Zappos and Nordstrom. And that was for back to school of August of 2017. And then from there, we expanded into QVC, a lot of independents. Later came Kohl's and Target and DSW. We've then expanded into having distributors. One distributor is in Australia, one distributor is up in Vancouver, Canada, another one is in the Netherlands. So we've been able to get out on more of a global scale, plus having our own direct-to-consumer BILLYFootwear.com. And that's really been driven by the customer base. A lot of our designs, we started with a very simple high top and a very simple low top. But as the customer base continued to find us, they would reach out and say, have you considered this? So the new designs that one sees, the new designs that people see on our website or in stores, that's heavily influenced by the customer base, saying like, you know what, we love your brand, but have you considered a sandal? Have you considered a hiking boot? Have you considered more of an athletic sneaker? Have you considered a different zipper configuration? So it's been amazing to be able to have this community that is having success with the brand, but also driving us as a brand to think bigger of more, diverse designs. Yet at the same time, being responsible as a business, try to keep the SKU count in tight so we don't get overwhelmed with inventory.
How big is the marketplace? Have you done market research on, and maybe talk about your customer profile? Are there people out there that the average kind of shoe person wouldn't expect to be buying Billy Footwear? Walk us through kind of the size of the market and maybe some surprise customers you've had along the way.
Yeah. So if someone's looking at our brand and trying to do some research, what I think typically someone will say we are an adaptive brand. That's what one would think. And we certainly have a huge audience out there that are coming to the brand because of some sort of disability. I mean, that was the inspiration behind starting the brand in the first place, just to overcome my own challenge. But 50% of our customer base does not have a disability. So it really is this situation where it's being a brand to kind of bridge this world between adaptive and non-adaptive. The audience that are approaching the brand because of some sort of functional need, that audience has a tendency to be the most vocal and the most excited and the most, driven to share. All those stories are just incredible. So we want to celebrate those. But the brand has this ability to transcend between this adaptive space and this non-adaptive space. So we find ourselves in this area where we're what's the best way to put it? We find ourselves in this area where I guess we're a leader in the inclusive space, and people are reaching out to us saying like, boy, we'd love to have you in our stores, which is just absolutely incredible. And it's just a matter of continuing to work with the customer and, I don't know. I mean, listening to the customer and then driving like the brand forward. It's been great.
That's awesome. Who's the worst retailer to work with? I'm just kidding. Don't answer that.
I wouldn't be able to answer like who's the worst retailer, but I will say that it's very competitive out there, and I know that our team is we're a small team. I mean, the team started with Darren and myself way back when, but now we're a team of 30. So for us, 30 people on the team is a big number, but in comparison to a lot of other brands out there, 30 people is not very much at all. So the team works incredibly hard. I know a lot of retailers out there have chargebacks now, and sometimes those can be difficult to manage. If you may want any oversight or whatever, you hit with a chargeback, which makes things difficult.
Right. When you work with retail partners, does it, are they requesting anything, custom design for their stores or for their brand models? Do you guys do that as well? Or is it just you guys come up with the lines and you put it in there? Because I think increasingly that's what we're looking at in the future of footwear is like retailers are eventually going to start to look to brands and say, okay, like we want to curate something just for us. Right. And that can be really tough for folks who are already like yourself being very creative and producing things. But how do you look at that and deal with those sorts of things when they pop up?
Yeah, great question. We have not made a specific shoe um, for any major retailers to just sit on their shelves. That said, we have had
Yeah.
collaborations. So, for example, with Zappos,
Okay.
we did a collaboration for
Yep.
Special Olympics, the Special Olympics games, the national games that were in Florida a few years back, and it was a shoe specifically meant for that event. It had all the colorways, and we met the minimum requirements for the factory, and it was great. We've done a lot of other collaborations with individuals that are part of our customer base. They have a huge following, and those have been exciting projects too.
Mm.
So we've considered now that we have both the direct to consumer and wholesale channel. So what we've done is we've considered having a particular silhouette for specific retailers, not necessarily a custom build-up for one particular retailer, but a particular silhouette that may be more cost advantageous for one retailer as compared to another, which we're looking for more of like a full grain leather, like a high-end shoe.
Yeah. And you said the key word there. It's like factory minimum order, right? Like people are always saying, like, why is the customization taking off? It's like, because it's expensive and it takes a long time to get it. People want a 2-day shipping. It's like, well, if there's nothing on the shelf, it's not as easy as slapping a label on it and send it to your house. Like it might take 6 weeks, and it might cost X amount, so it's still this, kind of weird time where we're talking about what may come in the footwear industry against like, yeah, that's what the consumer says, but in reality, their pocketbook says something completely different. So those collaborations, while cool, it doesn't always pay the bills, right? It's a great thing that you can do, but as a business, you have to think inherently about growth and taking care of those 30 employees now that you have and keeping that going. And but I'll say, like, it's incredible that you guys take that feedback from the community. It's almost like crowdsourcing organically on different things, because I think a lot of times some brands get caught up in that they perhaps know better than the market, and those people get caught really quickly in bad water and choppy waters. Some of that happened over the last couple of years, and you can kind of look at some of the winners and losers, not just for that, but also how many pairs they brought in against where the market actually was, and it is a tough business. Are you looking at anything in 2024 in terms of supply chain challenges or things that you're focused on where you're like, you know what, we need to keep an eye on this because this is a little bit concerning to our business?
Well, one pivot as a business that we made, it took a lot of work, and we're almost out of the woods, but we've used to rely on having a third-party logistics center be our shipper to all of our major retailers. And we made a concerted effort to take that in-house. So we were finding that we just weren't in control over that leg of the supply chain. Things became seamless at the factory level. Things became seamless at the shipping level, and then coming into the ports. But from going from the port to actually our warehouse to get out to customers, that leg of the chain hit us tremendously hard in 2022. And we found ourselves in a position where we just couldn't get our product out of like a local third-party logistics center. So that was a big investment that we did with our own company to get another warehouse kind of local to our headquarters to be able to take on that responsibility, which puts us in the driver's seat of our schedule, as well as being able to connect, I guess, directly with the wholesale channel and really ship to the start ship instead of like doing everything we can to like just make it before the cancel date.
Yeah, it's a control your own destiny move, Billy. I think it's really smart. And I think a lot of companies learned during the COVID supply chain chaos that when things are out of your control, you can't guarantee delivery. You can't guarantee certain aspects. And as a new and emerging and growing brand, that's like priorities 1, 2, and 3 to make sure you have the product there on time as you committed to having it. But I want to go back real quick as we close out to this Zappos relationship, because Zappos just received the 2023 Footwear News Achievement Award for the Social Impact Award for their support of many of the same customers that you all serve at BILLY Footwear, and obviously their partnership with the Special Olympics games in Florida. Talk about how Zappos, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like that was at least your first kind of retail entry point. Maybe you had Nordstrom, because your Seattle base was also in that mix. But talk to me about how Zappos was the perfect retail partner for a brand like BILLY Footwear to get launched and started at Back to School 2017, I think you said. What makes Zappos unique? I don't think every company in the shoe space is equipped or set up or has the kind of forethought to partner with the BILLY Footwear. So talk to us about that relationship.
Zappos has been such an incredible team to work with since day one. When we were really emerging into the market, there was a department within Zappos called Zappos Adaptive that was also going live. And that was really the entry point, our entry point into Zappos and the beginning of that relationship. Since then, Zappos Adaptive has just become more of like just a greater part of Zappos. But Zappos has made a real effort to really put that spotlight on the importance of inclusion. So there's so many brands out there, so many companies out there that are focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, really making that initiative one of the top priorities within companies. But Zappos seemed to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And it's been a relationship that's been tremendous since day one. It was one of those deals where, I say this often, it was like we knew each other all of our lives and we finally met, because what they wanted to accomplish and what we wanted to accomplish, we were speaking the same language. So it started small, but as more and more people found out about our brand on the Zappos platform, we were both able to succeed. And for Zappos to get that reward, or not reward, but for Zappos to get that award, it is tremendously fitting and very exciting, because they truly are leaders in this space.
That's awesome. Well, what is, if retailers are listening, customers are listening, what's the best way to get a hold of BILLY Footwear and to connect with the brand?
Well, I would direct people back to the mothership, which would be billyfootwear.com. Through there, you can connect with our team to be able to, one, if you want to set up an account, connect with the sales team. But also, if you're a customer, we do have a store locator tab on there. And every single one of those little goat pins that are on there show local stores in your area or big box stores. And that spans not only the United States, but across the planet.
That's awesome. And folks can also hit up info@fdra.org. Just put in BILLY Footwear in the subject line, and we can send requests over to the team as well. Billy, thank you so much. You probably hear this a lot, but tragedies often kind of direct us down these paths in our lives that create purpose and desire and drive, and you are an inspiration. And as terrible as that day was when you were 18 years old, you're just bringing so much innovation and thoughtfulness to our industry, something that we need consistently and constantly. So on behalf of FDRA, thank you for being a member, but also thank you for doing something really cool in the industry and shaking things up. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's our absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, folks, this has been another exciting edition of Shoe and Show. Hit up shoeandshow.com for all of our episodes. As we make our way through the new year, we'll be bringing great guests all along the way. If you have topics you want us to talk about, if you want to be a guest, shoot us a note at info@fdra.org, and we'll be happy to consider your request. In the meantime, we hope you have a great rest of your day. Check back in next Monday when the new episode drops. And until then, Shoe and Show is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.